Canada's economy facing an uncertain future.
Economic surveys suggest that Canada's economy is already experiencing a technical recession, with output expected to shrink by better than 1% annualized in the second quarter of 2025 and 0.1% in Q3, driven by rising unemployment and falling exports due to trade uncertainties with the U.S.
Canada's economic growth this spring put a chill on business investment, hiring, and consumer confidence.
Yeah, it's just a hell of a mess right now.
The cost of living making it harder to get by and leaving little hope for the future.
Canada's economy may fall in 2026 as it keeps going down and down and down.
We talk about possibly leaving Canada because why should we stay here? Just be overtaxed, underserviced, healthcare sucks, education sucks, government is bloated.
Canada, a great white north, a nation known for its stability, its politeness, and its vast natural beauty. For decades, it has been seen as a beacon of prosperity and a safe haven in a turbulent world. But beneath this calm surface, the foundations of the Canadian economy are cracking.
Most agencies surveyed believe that Q2 and Q3 GDP growth will be negative, thus meeting the technical definition of a recession. The primary focus is on potential job losses, citing declining sales, cautious consumer behavior, and a housing market unresponsive to interest rate cuts.
What if I told you that the very things that made Canada seem prosperous are now pushing it towards a cliff? A perfect storm of unsustainable real estate, stagnating productivity, and a controversial immigration policy has created a house of cards, and some economists believe it's only a matter of time before it all comes tumbling down. This isn't just a Canadian story, it's a warning for other advanced economies around the world. Canada is simply the first out of the gate, and what happens here could be a preview of what's to come. So, how did a G7 nation find itself in this position, and is a crash in 2026 not just possible, but probable? Let's break it down. To understand Canada's predicament, we have to start with the one thing everyone is talking about: housing. It's more than just a crisis, it's a national obsession that has warped the entire economy. After the 2008 global financial crisis, most Western countries saw their housing bubbles burst. The US market in particular went through a painful but necessary correction. Canada, however, dodged the bullet. Its banking system was more conservative, and its housing market wasn't as overheated. That seemed like a good thing at the time. But then, Canada followed the world in slashing interest rates to stimulate the economy. This flood of cheap money poured into a housing market that had never been corrected. It supercharged it. This reinforced a dangerous idea in the Canadian psyche that real estate is not just a place to live, but a foolproof, can't-lose investment vehicle. Think about it. If the price of a dishwasher doubled every 5 years, we'd call it an economic failure. But when a house does the same, many Canadians see it as a fantastic outcome because it makes them wealthier on paper. This created a political trap. With the majority of the population now homeowners, and with Canadian household debt now exceeding the country's entire GDP, no politician dares to be the one to end the party. Any policy that would make homes cheaper, like raising interest rates significantly or tightening lending, would be political suicide. But the party has to end, one way or another. Over the last 2 decades, home prices have soared by over 300%, while median incomes have only increased by about 100%. The system is fundamentally broken. But this housing insanity is just a symptom of a much deeper, more dangerous disease: stagnating productivity. This is the part of the story that rarely makes headlines, but it's the real engine of Canada's decline. Simply put, Canadians are not making as much stuff or creating as much value per hour worked as their peers. Let's compare Canada to its closest neighbor, the United States. Culturally, they're similar, but economically, there's a huge gap. Even after adjusting for work hours, the average US worker is about 30% more productive than their Canadian counterpart. Why? It's not because Canadians are lazy. It boils down to one word: investment. To produce anything, you need land, labor, and capital. Capital is the stuff that makes more stuff: the machinery, the technology, the infrastructure, the research and development. The US diverts far more of its money into this kind of productive capital. In Canada, where is the investment money going? You guessed it, into housing. Wealthy individuals and investors are pouring their money into Toronto condos and Vancouver real estate rather than into businesses that create sustainable long-term value. This creates a vicious cycle. Businesses don't get the funding they need, workers don't get the advanced tools to become more productive. This means they can't be paid as much. And this would be fine if Canada wasn't so ridiculously expensive to live in because of the housing bubble. This leads to the next devastating consequence: brain drain. The best and brightest, the most ambitious engineers, doctors, and tech entrepreneurs look south. They see a country where they can earn more, have better career opportunities, and probably spend less on a house, and they are leaving in droves. The latest census showed a 70% increase in this kind of emigration over the last decade. So Canada is losing its young, skilled workers. Its population is aging. Its productivity is flatlining. How has the government tried to plug these massive holes in the economy? With an unprecedented flood of immigration, on the surface, the logic seems sound. Bring in new people to fill jobs, support the aging population, and keep the economy growing, but the way Canada has done it is like pouring gasoline on a fire. They've essentially opened the doors to two groups. First, wealthy migrants who bring capital. Where do they invest that capital? Often right back into the luxury housing market, distorting it even further. Second, and far more consequentially, is a massive influx of temporary foreign workers and students. For a while, Canada had a failsafe. If unemployment rose above 6%, they would stop accepting temporary foreign labour to protect jobs for existing residents. This policy was designed to encourage wage growth and prevent exploitation. But in a desperate attempt to compensate for economic stagnation, that failsafe was brushed aside. This has had two profound effects. First, it has put immense, unprecedented strain on the housing market and public infrastructure, making the affordability crisis even worse. Second, by creating a vast supply of labour willing to work for lower wages, it has suppressed wage growth for everyone else and accelerated the brain drain as skilled Canadians see their earning potential shrink. Canada is now caught in a terrifying trap. It needs to keep the immigration taps wide open just to keep the economy from seizing up, but every new person adds more pressure to the very systems that are already at a breaking point. Turning off those taps now is the responsible long-term decision, but in the short term it would trigger one hell of a hangover. The economic growth, propped up by population growth, would evaporate overnight. So you have a housing bubble that's politically impossible to deflate. You have a productivity crisis driven by a lack of business investment. You have a brain drain of your most talented citizens. And you have an immigration policy that's making all of these problems worse. As if that weren't enough, Canada's old economic backbone, natural resources, is becoming less reliable in a changing global market. And its silent rivalry with the United States is becoming less silent, with the constant threat of tariffs shaking the fragile industries that remain. There are ways out of this. Canada could launch a massive nationwide investment in infrastructure and technology to boost productivity. It could reform its tax system to incentivize business investment over real estate speculation. It could take aggressive, meaningful steps to solve the housing crisis. But it has wasted decades. The refusal to act preemptively means that digging itself out of this hole is now twice as hard, and they are running out of time. In many concerning ways, the Canada of today looks eerily similar to the Spain of the early 2000s, an economy fueled by a massive real estate bubble and cheap credit. We all know how that story ended. Nobody can predict the future with certainty, but the warning signs are flashing red. The question is no longer if the party in Canada will end, but how painful the fallout will be when it does. But the clock is ticking towards 2026, and the world should be watching